Today on the Hobby Grotto, we're painting a Free Guild soldier from the Living City. I'm starting off here with XV88, which I'm going to use as a base for both the clothing and the skin. It's important to keep all these base coats nice and thin. Don't worry about coverage so much. I generally do a second layer anyway. And when you're painting quartered uniforms like this, I think it's always a good tip to start with the lighter colour first. That way you can neaten up the edges with the darker colour, which in this case is Caliban Green. I'm a big fan of this colour. It's got great coverage and you can do a lot with it. I'm going to be mixing this up later to more of a traditional green, but if you mix white with this colour for your layers and highlights, it creates a lovely kind of emerald sort of green, so that's always something to think about. And this colour scheme itself is what I use for my personal Cities of Sigmar army, and I wanted to create a really naturalistic colour scheme to represent the Living City, given their affinity with nature. A rustic vibe, reminiscent of some woodsmen in a dark forest. Everything that's not clothing is going to be painted with Rhinox hide, which is a great base for all this stuff. It's rich but also a neutral colour, which won't distract from the heraldry and facial details. And woodsman was the word I was thinking about when choosing the colour palette and painting this army. It's really important to have inspiration for your models. There was actually one particular image that really inspired me with this scheme, and that was the Daybreak Ranger card art from Innistrad, which was a Magic the Gathering expansion. So check that out on Google if you want to have a gander. Lovely art. While I got the Rhinox hide out, I'm also giving the base a dry brush just on the surface where I've got the sand down. And this is just the way I do all my bases, so your process may vary, but I like to keep them fairly neutral. There are so many options for silver paint. I like to go quite dark, and I think this also fits the vibe of the model. Hunters prowling through the trees don't want shiny stuff on their person. Iron Warriors is probably my favourite of the Citadel silver paints. It's got particularly good coverage, and it never seems to come out looking grainy, I find. Covering the whole model in Nuln Oil will give us all our shading in a very efficient way. You can also mix a touch of black paint with this wash if you want an even stronger black lining effect. Just make sure you're scanning the model for pooling, particularly around the face and important details. Each of the base coats is going to be repainted with a base layer of the same colour, leaving the darkened base paint in the shading and the darker still Nuln Oil in the even deeper recesses. This is going to bring back some of the saturation for the colours and also create a better transition into our layers. I'm not worrying about repainting any of the silver or flesh parts at this stage. And you can even drop the Rhinox hide part if you're pressed for time, as it only really makes a subtle difference. Doing the eyes before painting all the face layers and highlights is much less stressful. I know I personally often make mistakes with eyes all the time, so this way we can keep adjusting until we're happy. The same goes for the black pupil. You can always just paint a vertical line through the eye and then readjust the whole thing to shape. I've got one eye bigger than the other on this model, so I'm just adjusting it with some Abaddon black, which is going to be covered up by the upcoming skin layers. My favourite part of the model, painting the face. Not really. I don't like painting faces much, but I will say it's probably the most rewarding stage in the process, where you really bring the models to life. I'm leaving the XV88 in the deepest recesses of the face. You can go a little bit more extreme with face highlighting and shading because the detail is much more condensed, and also it's a focal point. You don't have to use Cadian flesh tone either. XV88 is a good base for a range of different skin tones, so you can kind of use whatever skin paints you'd like. The next stage up is Kislev Flesh, and this colour has a bit more yellow to it, so you don't want to cover up too much of the previous colour. Skin looks good when it's got that transition from a bit more of a rosy colour, which is why Cadian Flesh Tone and Bugman's Glow make a great base. And I'm not just applying this to the face, I'm also doing some highlighting on the fingers and the knuckles, and a little bit on the ears and neck as well. Now it's time to build up some layers, and I've mixed XV88 with Bone to create a 50-50 transition between the two colours. And the effect I'm going for here is a bit more of a dingy, dirty looking white overall. So I'm still going to end up with a final white highlight, but I'm going to take this color through a few more layers to make it a bit more of a feature color and really work with the contrast provided in his detailed clothing. Like the green doesn't need as much because it wouldn't kind of look as dirty if we're thinking realistically about the way this model would look, but a whiter color is going to have more kind of a brown tone in it and it's going to look a bit more dirty. I'm going to cut a corner here. You could always do a layer or two more of blending up before going straight to the bone, but I've mixed a bit of medium with the bone to make the paint a bit more translucent so it's not as visually heavy in coverage. And you just want to put this on lightly. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 coats of this to get it nice and blended. I'm doing the same layering on the green with Warpstone Glow mixed in. And as I mentioned, the green parts of the uniform don't need as many layers as the white because it's a darker color, but you can do more if you want some more subtle blends. I'm just going to go over the model with this, maybe with just one layer before moving on to the highlights. I'm doing one final highlight on all the colors, and this is the stage where you can really spend some time on the mini if you want to, with complete edge highlighting of everything. I tend to just apply the highlights to the major points of light, and I think this approach is particularly useful if you're painting a lot of models. You also want to make sure you're concentrating highlights in the areas of the model that are focal points to help draw the eye to them and highlight your work, pun intended. The metal parts can get a touch of lighter silver if you wish, but highlights are not always necessary on true metallic surfaces. I like to put them on because I start off with quite a dark silver base. To highlight the leather parts, I mix a bit of bone with Rhinox hide, and this will help give the surface an aged and faded look. And finally, I'm going to come back through and add some highlights to the face and fingers. Just some white added to Kislev flesh for this because you want the highlights to be quite strong. I like to keep most of my miniature bases in a similar colour for uniformity, so I'm just going to hit it with a dry brush of Sylvaneth bark and then paint the rim with Old Faithful black. And there you have it, a Free Guild warrior from the Living City. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this colour scheme is the way I paint my own cities of Sigmar Army, so if you want to see some more of that, check out my Instagram link in the description of this video. I've got some more pictures up there. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Hobby Grotto.